Good morning and welcome to Flight Pass. My name is Simon. Hope you're doing good today. We are continuing our story about Waterloo. In fact, we should probably now update our title there. Let me just change that. We followed yesterday the trip of the Prussians from Woevre to Waterloo, and today we're going to be looking at the attack of the Prussians on the right flank of Waterloo. So we'll just change this now back to Waterloo, and then everyone knows where we are. If you're new to the channel, what you get on the top there is on the left is the subject that we're talking about, and the middle will be the location, and the right is the date. And the time is around about 3:30 in the afternoon. And if you were following yesterday, the 4th Corps of the Prussian army under the command of Bülow had been forming up on the in this area here, which we should start off with. We'll just start there, fly there. So I hope you're all good today. If you're new to the stream, what we do here is we use Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 to investigate moments in history. And this flight simulator has got satellite technology and photogrammic imagery, and so it allows us to fly around. We're using the Huey today in the Canadian Rescue colours, so it allows us to fly around, and we can have a look at the distances, the topography, and get a better insight into what happened on days in history. We've done D-Day, and you'll find during the course of this video, you've probably seen one pop up already that says Waterloo, and that would be the Waterloo playlist, and then later on in the stream there'll be a D-Day playlist pop up as a postcard above, and you'll be able to click on them and go back and find out all the previous streams that we've done. And it has been a marathon. We're not in any hurry to get this done. We're trying to investigate this as much as possible, and so don't expect it to be the conclusion even of the battlefield today. In the last stream, we were flying around here, a place called Lasnay, Saint-Lambert, and we were trying to find a monument to a Prussian officer. I believe he was a colonel, and I can just remember what his name was. It's like Colonel Schwerin, I believe it was. And he was one of the first Prussian officers to be killed on the 18th of June. In this area here, and let me just get the map out for you so you all know exactly where we are. This is the journey that we've taken. We've started off down here in Elba, so go back and if you want to find the story, the whole story, we started off here February 1815, and Napoleon comes across. He lands at this bay here called the Gulf Juan, and he moves inland through Grasse into Digne and Sisteron, Gap, eventually to Grenoble, Lyon, and then up to Auxerre, and then into Paris via Fontainebleau, Paris of Fontainebleau. And then from there, when his peace negotiations didn't work, he moves into the offensive and he moves his army up to this area here, Avesnes-sur-Helpe, and eventually they cross the border in 3 columns centered on Beaumont, moved up on Charleroi on the 15th, engages the Prussians here at this number 4, which is the battlefield of Ligny, and Quatre Bras here, where this number 3 is. This is on the 16th. This forces the Prussians to retreat, and they move north to Wavre, and that forces Wellington back to the ridge at Mont Saint-Jean, which is here. And in the last stream, we were talking about the journey of Boulou's corps from a place called Dion, Le Mans, which is to the southeast of Wavre, and it's the 25 kilometers that we've followed. He went from Wavre, Biège, Le Mans, to Lasnay, Chapelle, Saint-Lambert, and this is where we basically left them, forming up in this area here, and then advancing through this wood, which is called the Bois de Paris, and coming out in this area, just to which is on the right flank of Napoleon's. So that's the situation at the moment. So and here we are. We're on the currently on the edge of the eastern edge of the battlefield. We're at the Bois de Paris, and you can see the plain of the battlefield of Waterloo ahead of us. We've got the ridge here at Mont Saint-Jean just here. We've got the Smohain Brook area here, so this is the extreme left position of Wellington, and over here where these trees are, where the white dot is now, is Napoleon's position, and this is the village here of Plancenoit, just where the white dot is kind of now. Okay, so this means so let's have a quick look at this escape. You can see as the Prussians come out of this wood, we discussed how they weren't really the French didn't come out here to meet them, really. They didn't. They could have come out here and caused issues whilst they're trying to form up, but they didn't. Their focus is completely on that Wellington's position over there. But as you can see here, the nature of this part of the battlefield here, this is the area that the Prussians will advance across, means that they are sort of channeled, to be honest. There's a steep defile here. This is the river Dyle, or Dyle, D-Y-L-E, on this side with woods. So this sort of defines the left-hand boundary. It basically means that the Prussians can't come round to the south of Napoleon's position, and they're kind of they have to move across in these fields on the right here as we fly along this sort of left edge of the battlefield. Up ahead of us now, we got the village of Plancenoit, and you should see the church somewhere in this area here. This church has been rebuilt since the battle. I believe it was the one we see here is from 1856, but it shows you the location, and it has a strong sort of wall around it. So this is the left-hand side of the village of Plancenoit. So we're now into the village here. So this is they're stone buildings here. They have cellars there. So it's a pretty easy place, I suppose, to defend. If you are a defender, there's quite a lot of little buildings here, and difficult to hold. And we're looking at here. We've got the Inn of La Belle Alliance, and this is behind here is Napoleon's positions, and Remember, Erlon's corps is on this side of the battlefield, down here, and Lobau has a couple of divisions over this side here as well. Right, so that's the sort of the general look of the this section of the battlefield. Let's start talking about the beginning of it. I'll just get my notes sorted. Now remember, Napoleon has seen... Sorry about this noise. Napoleon is aware of the Prussians in this area, and he has been aware of the Prussians in this area since probably around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Sorry. But Bulu's men are starting to appear. That was your fault, by the way. So you're in charge of flying, and you should have warned me that I was going to crash then. Let's just spin around here. There was no effort at all, essentially, to try to bottle up Bulu's corps in these woods over here, even though they were aware of the presence of the Prussians from about 1 o'clock. So, as you can see, I'm flying live. I'm trying to sort my notes out at the same time. No AI here. Well, again, you see, you're supposed to be telling me when I'm crashing. Right. Okay, let's try and... I've got an awkward page at the moment, and it won't just stay. It won't stay open for me. Let's I'm going to just pause here whilst I try and sort out my notes, and it allows us to jump into the. Okay, so this is the area here where the Prussians are coming out. They've formed up in this wood here. We were trying to find that monument. It's kind of in a little square with a tree on it. If anyone knows where that is, it might be one of these places over here, actually. Could be here, maybe not. This is a very this is the road from the Bois de Paris towards Plancenoit. You should be able to see if you look. Maybe if we go a bit lower. Prussians come along this road here, and what I'm trying to show you is that the it doesn't quite show up, but you might just be able to see there on the it's kind of if you follow that little road along there, where I'm looking right now, you can just see the spire of the church of Plancenoit. And so this is the focal point, and becomes the focal point for the Prussians. At this time, the French have a number of cavalry divisions in this area, essentially on their right flank, and these are the divisions of Domon and Suburvi. And they were mainly concerned with covering the right flank up this Smahain. And then he has Lobau's 2 infantry divisions in support, and behind that then is the Imperial Guard itself, and they were described as they were standing in the rear of the village of Plancenoit. So we would probably be thinking then that this area here is likely to be where the Imperial Guard will be hanging out, in this area, just here. And there was also there's two of D'Erlon's divisions. They were Duret's infantry and Jacquinot's cavalry. They are engaged with Wellington's left, so they're engaged at the time and around in this area over here. So that's the sort of situation on the left, and this is around about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Now, in context, then we've got continued attacks going in at this time on Hougoumont over this side. This is Rail's corps, so there's continued attacks going in on this position here, which is the sort of fortified right wing of Wellington. There was continued fighting and over the central position of La Haye-Sainte. But this is just after the cavalry charge of the British on D'Erlon's infantry. So there's a lot of disorder around this area at the time. And now Boulou is concentrating his troops in this area of the Bois de Paris. And he's also, at the same time, he's waiting for his artillery to come up. The artillery was behind most of the infantry at the time. Blucher had arrived here at this point, and they could see from this position and they had contacts with Wellington's army at this time, and they could see that a number of troops retreating on the ridge. They could see that there was a lot of people going back, streaming forward, and muffling was coming over here and telling the Prussians, they need to hurry up. And so Blucher forces Boulou to engage, even though he wasn't quite ready. And so he comes out of this wood here with 2 brigades. It had some artillery attached to them, and they engaged Domon's troopers and drives them back. And this is possibly, remember when we were talking about Wellington and the crisis that was happening up on the ridge here. This is possibly when he can hear the guns of the Prussians opening up in this area here, when the cavalry charges of the French cuirassiers are charging up in this area, and then they hear cannon fire coming from over this side of the battlefield. So the two brigades that are engaged by Bülow at this time are by one was led by a guy called Lostin, and the other one was the brigade following up behind called commanded by Hiller. And essentially they're coming down this road here, and Lostin is on this side of the road in this area here, driving this way, and Hiller is on the left-hand side. Now, two of Lostin's battalions move across and support Saxe-Weimar, who are in this area here. And so they're linking up now with the extreme left flank of Wellington. So they're forming up on this road, and they start with skirmishing light battalions ahead, moving down in this area here. So it actually might be this road here we're talking about. So we've got one brigade on this side, Lostin's, and one on this side, Hilliers. And waiting for them over here are two divisions of French cavalry, with two divisions of infantry standing behind them. And they say they're one each side of the highest point of the Plancenoit road. So if we're thinking French, then we're probably talking in this area here, to two each side of this road. And you've got the advance of the Prussians coming towards us. So the time then is about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and as I say, they're coming out of this wood here, and they're the spire of Plancenoit's church, which is here. This spire here is the target, so you can see how that is, if you keep a focus on it, you can see how that becomes the focus point all the way back this way towards the Prussians in the wood. So they're going to be heading using that as their target point. And it's believed at this point as well, if they looked right, so we're looking this way, you can see, ignore the fact that that panorama mound is there, because that would have been a part of a ridge, but they could see from this position here the waves of French cavalry attacking Wellington's position on that Mont Saint-Jean ridge. And so it's a very crucial moment in the battle, and it's obviously one that because this at this point here, with the waves of French cavalry moving up onto that ridge there, the reserves that are behind Plancenoit, which over here, would have been engaged at this point to help the cavalry. But at the exact time when they could have been engaged, the Prussian, a corps of Prussians is pouring out of the wood at the Bois de Paris into this area here, and this then diverts the attention of Napoleon. So it's believed the first engagement at this in this area is around about 4:30. So they've taken about an hour to get across here, and the first to be engaged is Lozvin's brigade. And they say that they reached the chateau of Fichemont. And break into a skirmish formation here, finding it occupied by the French. And with a determined bayonet charge, they managed to clear those buildings from the from their occupiers. And we have cavalry action in this area as well. The Prussian hussars throwing back a regiment of French cavalry in this area. And there's a lot of toing and throwing going on here, counter-charging. And this is securing the sort of link up now with Wellington's left, which is sort of centered, is locked onto that area there. Now, of course, Boulou is actually moving south of Fichemont Chateau in this area here, and we were talking about how Zieten is the corps that it will be coming along this section here to actually join up with Wellington later on. So from this situation here, Lozvin continues his attack, and is described as moving forward up the ridge. So from this position here, we could see that that's probably moving up this way. And Lobai starts to feel threatened in this area here. And he starts to pull back because his flank is threatened. So presumably he's sort of in this area here. Prussians are getting up on to the ridge to his right, and he's now pulling back into the village of Plancenoit itself. And Lebel would place one brigade of infantry in this village, and he'd have another one would turn to face the front, but in positions further to the north. So presumably then we're talking in the village here, but also in this area around here. And the Prussians start bringing up artillery, is described, onto this ridge, and presumably, not sure whether these trees were here, but we're looking possibly at this area here would be where the Prussians bring up their artillery. So at this point here, Labau has secured his right flank on Plancenoit, the stream, brook, river, what you want to call it. This valley here is securing his, protecting his right flank, so he's not going to get outflanked to the right. He's got he's occupying the village here with the church just below us there, and it seems like a strong position. And he's facing his division is facing the two brigades coming up this way. Now, of course, this was an order from Blucher to move forwards. These amounts of Prussian troops, two brigades, was not going to be enough to dislodge Labau at the moment. And so it's this point that Bulu is hurriedly trying to sort of form up other brigades and move them out to behind to bring up in support. So already then, just the presence here of two Prussian brigades has locked in quite a lot of Labau's corps, which was a part of Napoleon's reserve already here. And so these troops that are moving to the right, so imagine they were here and they're moving to the right this way, are not now going to be going up here and supporting the cavalry charges up this way. And so the Battle of Plancenoit is about to begin. In the meantime, let's just jump in the helicopter, do a bit of flying. And we just spin back round here. We're facing south at the moment, and we'll spin back around and head north. So at this time, it's around about 4:30. We talked briefly about Zieten, and Zieten is moving up, and he's beginning to link up with Wellington's left. Okay, that actually seems like a good place to have a quick break. When we come back, then we'll have a brief look at the link up between Zieten and Wellington on the beginning of the ridge of Mont Saint-Jean. If you have been following along, then thank you very much, and I love it if you could like and subscribe so I can do more of these things. And we will come back in a couple of minutes if you're watching live, and we will continue the story of the Prussians' entry onto the battlefield. Okay, see you in a moment. And hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name's Simon, and welcome to Flight Past. We're in the Huey, and we're on the eastern side of the battlefield of Waterloo. We've just had a look at Bouloo's initial attacks and movement towards Plancenoit on the eastern side, and this was at around about 4:30 in the afternoon. We're heading now up to trying to find a place called Genval, and it's to the north and east of the battlefield, and essentially this is where Ziethen's corps manages to get itself on this day. Now Ziethen's corps was moving up. Sorry about this. Ziethen's corps was moving up behind Bouloo's corps, and so Bouloo had moved from Wavre here at number 5, and then moving across to Lasnay, Chapelle, Saint-Lambert, and then out towards the village of Plancenoit down here, which is Napoleon's right. And at the same time, Ziethen's corps, who had been based at Bierge, had moved to Rixensart, and they were coming. They were supposed to be moving via this village here called Orhain, and Orhain is the name given to the road, which is called the Orhain Road, that links up with Mont Saint Jean. There, you can see it will go along this Bassé-Lasnay and La Marache. But they managed to get themselves slightly lost and coming. They were actually coming through this place called Genval. So we're heading to try and find that location. So this is the village here of Genval. Just where that marker is there, my white dot. And so if you look over here, this is Rixensart, and you can see Wavre look in the distance over there. So this is the direction, and then that Ziethen's corps will approach the battlefield. So you can see that they're much further north than Bouloo's corps. Now, the state of the roads in this area was even worse than down the roads that Bouloo had taken over here on our right, and to the point where the troops had to almost march in single file in many areas. And so it turns out that it was the artillery weren't the slowest part of the corps here. They were spread out so far long that all semblance of sort of order had sort of broken down. They were sort of trudging along, following each other. So we just spin around here now, and then we should then see the view back towards the battlefield. And you can see over here, by the way, there's someone flying live. And just a note, we are on Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, so if you want to come and join in, you'll find me flying to the south of Brussels, of course, and it's on the European West server. We've got live weather on, so it's looking like a sort of a nice-ish day here, so it's a good day for a fly. And so here we are. This is Genval, and this is the direction that Ziethen's corps will move towards. Move towards the battlefield of Waterloo. It's reported that Steinmetz will reach the Lasnay defile, they call it, at around about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. and at that point they are they wait. Now when they say Lasne defile, I think they mean somewhere here, and they're waiting then for the rest of the corps to catch up. Steinmetz is a brigade commander, and if you remember right back to the beginning of the campaign, he was the guy who was in charge of the brigade that was on the border at Lobs and Thuin, and so they've been engaged in the battle there. They were engaged a lot at Ligny in the front lines there, and they were the lead brigade in Ziethen's corps on this way as well. And but they're going to wait here, so where we are now, waiting for Perch's corps to catch up, and they were following along behind. Now at this point, in this area here, whilst they're waiting for the corps to sort of organise itself, the chief of staff, whose name was Reich, I believe, or Reich, he moves forward on his horse and towards the field of the battle. So he comes along this, essentially along this area here, and he meets up with Muffling. Now remember Muffling, he's the Prussian liaison officer who was allocated to Wellington's staff, and Muffling had ridden across to the left-hand side of the battlefield to establish contact with his countrymen and to coordinate their actions. Now, I'm not sure where that would be, but we're heading now towards the battlefield, so presumably it will be in this area somewhere where the white dot is now, which is on the left-hand side of Wellington's position. And but essentially Muffling will turn to Reich and tells him about Wellington's situation and that how desperate it was getting up on the ridge, and expressed a keen desire for basically the Prussian army to intervene immediately onto the battlefield before Wellington's line collapses completely. So this is the scene that they're likely to have come out to. This the right-hand side of Wellington positions. There'll be streams of people moving off to the right here, going back towards Brussels, injured, deserters, you name it. Complete confusion, loud noises, smoke everywhere coming up from this. So Reich, okay, it says, fine, I'll go and get my corps, and he will spin back round and head back to his corps commander, who was Ziethen. Now, when he gets back to the position where the corps was forming up, so we're talking back this way, essentially probably over here somewhere, he finds that Ziethen is not there anymore. In fact, Ziethen's gone, had ridden rearward to chivvy along Perch's corps, and that he'd only left Steinmetz at this position. You're in charge of flying, so make sure I don't crash here. I seem to be sinking here. Let's get some collective. Reich grabs Steinmetz's cavalry and rushes them forwards from this position towards Wellington's position. Whee. That's a bit too much rudder. And so he rides them forwards over here. And so Steinmetz's cavalry, his vanguard, essentially become the first Prussians to join up with Wellington, and they start to join up in this area here on the left-hand side. Now, what this does, it means that Vivian, the British cavalry commander, can now move his cavalry to the Wellington centre, and then as more and more Prussian troops arrive, then each time they arrive, they are relinquishing the Allied armies' left flank in there, or being able to move into the centre. And so this is around about 6 o'clock in the evening. So at this point, Wellington is very, very well aware that the Prussians' influence on the battlefield has taken an impact. He's starting to see the fruits of their arrival onto the battlefield. And so this is occurring. This is about 6 o'clock in the afternoon. All right. That seems like another good place to just take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll then we will find that Bulu, who's over here at this Saint Lambert and coming out of the woods in front of us, starts reinforcing the two brigades of Hiller and Lostin on this side, and then we start getting the first wave of attacks on Plancenoit itself. So. Okay, thanks for watching. Do all the likes and the hugs and the loves, and I will see you in a moment. Hello, welcome to Flight Past. My name is Simon. Good to see you. And we are in the Huey helicopter flying over the eastern part of the battlefield of Waterloo. And in fact, we're looking south now. We're going to turn around, and what you'll see is essentially the over here, where my white dot is now, are the woods where the Prussians came out of. From around about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Now we've looked at the opening sequence where Bulu's early brigades are pressed forward under Blucher's urgency to engage essentially with the French to try to relieve the pressure that Wellington was experiencing up on the ridge of Mont Saint-Jean. And how they had come out of these woods just below us here and advanced through these fields towards the village of Plancenoit and taking the chateau of Fichemont on the way. And then we also looked then at Ziethen's corps, who came up from Genval over this side here, and they started to form up in this area, and then the vanguard of Ziethen's corps under basically Steinmetz's cavalry then moved up onto the ridge of Mont Saint-Jean on the Wellington's left side, and that enables Vivian's cavalry to be relieved, and Vivian's cavalry moved into the center position around that panorama that you see there with the blue location symbol on it. So the impact of the Prussians are starting to be felt positively for Wellington and negatively for Napoleon. And we're now getting to the point where it's around about 6 o'clock in the afternoon. And the first assault now is going to go in on Plancenoit. And it starts with a Prussian artillery bombardment there on crest, just in front of the village of Plancenoit. And the first assault is going in with Hiller's battalions, about 6 battalions from Hiller's brigade. And they will move in on the southern side of a road. Now let me just try and find that for you. We'll just spin around here. And this is where the Bulu's 4th Corps was forming up, and then they were coming up and up through these trees and then out onto this the battlefield plain, I suppose we could call it. I'm just going to pause here and jump out. It might be a little bit easier to see. So this is the direction of Bulu's, the advance of Bulu's corps, heading onto the battlefield. Now, as you remember, when we get, we have Hiller's brigade on the left and Lostin's on the right. And they were kind of advancing down this road here. And there's some battalions in this wood on the left as well, which was known as Vireri Wood. And what you've got as well is, so we remember we left this position because the 2 brigades weren't going to be enough to attack this position. And we think that the artillery had moved up into somewhere around this area here. And what we can see over this side here is the church of Plancenoit here. So this is the sort of focal point that they're all driving towards in this sort of direction there. And behind these 2 brigades, that comes the brigades of Hackey and the rear guard of Rissel. So the first artillery starts attacking, and then we get the actual infantry attacking. And this is Hilliers battalions, and they start attacking the village. And Simmer is the French guy in Lobel's corps, and he's got about 9 battalions defending their positions here in the village of Plancenoit. Initially, they're forced back from the edge of the village by sheer weight of numbers. But the church becomes a focal point because it's got a high wall around it. And it's almost like a sort of a citadel, a kind of a castle, defending a central position. So we should see the kind of view that the French would have had looking back towards the Prussian advance. The French had got artillery pieces up here as well that were firing canister at point-blank range. And they describe how the dead started piling up around this sort of church area. But nevertheless, sort of a concerted defense wasn't enough, and the sheer numbers then managed to overwhelm the French here. And by around about 6 o'clock, then the village is taken by the Prussians. Now, when they describe the village, I'm not actually sure how far that extended. You see, it's quite a large village. I don't know how much of this is modern now. So we'll just have to sort of use a good guesswork really here. And what's interesting at this point as well is that there's reports that Prussian cannonballs are beginning to fall in the area of the French reserves. Now, I think they would be probably in this area here. So you can see how cannonballs are going to start landing around this area. Even I think I might be wrong, but I've heard that it might have even been reaching the road at this point. The cannons are being fired and they're coming across, and presumably somewhere in this area is the Imperial Guard Reserve, and they actually start having cannonball landing around them. So you can see how that this is around about 6 o'clock, so this is getting to the crisis point of the battle, how this then becomes a major distraction to Napoleon. Now, we believe he's somewhere around here. This one of these buildings here is the Rossom farm. It's probably one of these buildings here, and so he's likely to probably be around here somewhere, and he's obviously got concerns now coming from his right-hand side, and trying to at the same time defeat Wellington on this ridge. This is the point when he's having to commit his actual reserve, and I'm just going to skip back on some of my notes to the formations. Here we go. So when we're talking about his reserve, let me find that. The Imperial, what do we mean by the Imperial Guard is what I'm trying to get at. And essentially the Imperial Guard is almost like a core in itself. So we've got the commander of I suppose of the Imperial Guard is a guy called Drouot, and then he's got the division, the Grenadier divisions, the Chasseurs divisions, and the Young Guard division in terms of infantry. And so you've got the first. The Grenadier Division, so Friant is the commander of that, and you've got the 1st and 2nd Grenadiers, and then you've got the 3rd and 4th Grenadiers. Then you've got the Chasseurs Division under Morand, and there's the 1st and 2nd Chasseurs, and the 3rd and 4th Chasseurs, and then you've got the Young Guard under de Hesme, and that's the 1st Tirailleurs, the 1st Voltigeurs under Chartrand, and the 3rd Tirailleurs and the 3rd Voltigeurs under Gouillet. So he's essentially here going to send off the Young Guard. So that's 1/3 of his infantry in his reserve is now going to be moved across in the direction of Plancenoit. Now you know that if the Prussians weren't here, then this Young Guard would have probably been the first troops to go up and support Ney's cavalry charges on the ridge here. So already this is a major impact occurring on the battle here, and this is essentially why the attack on Wellington fails. So the Young Guard move into Plancenoit, and we're then going to be waiting for the second phase of this this battle. Now, in the meantime, let's do a bit of flying. Zieten, remember we left him in the area over this side. He had gone back to hurry along Perche, and he returns at this point to his vanguard, and he continuing to move up towards Wellington's left. And what he says at this point is that he sees essentially what he believes is Wellington's front line is crumbling. There's masses of wounded, stragglers are moving essentially off this ridge here and back into the Bois de Saunier and on towards Brussels. So he's essentially he believes at this moment that Wellington's position is actually crumbling right as he's looking at it, and he sends an officer to inspect the situation at close orders, and that officer actually returns to him and says that he believes that Wellington has lost the battle. And what he sees as well is he's seeing the the Nassau's of Saxe-Weimar, and even Losothin's battalions who were attacking the chateau of Fichemont and being repelled. And it's believed at this time that Zieten is then joined by a staff officer from Blucher, and they have a conversation at this point. So let's just pause here and we'll jump out at this point. And we'll just move over to where we believe that conversation might have occurred. And I think it would be somewhere in this area here. They can basically see on the right-hand side, there's a stream of wounded and desertions going off into the woods. And on this side here, well, there's Prussians being forced back from the Fichemont, this area here, and Saxe-Weimar's moving back. So the whole appearance is of a lost battle. And from this point here, with Bulu down there to the south, in the direction of Genappe there, the High Command officer believes that the possession of Plancenoit would be the best option at this point, and to hold that would be they'd be able to win the battle that way. So he orders, this staff officer of Blucher's orders Zieten to move all his available troops, essentially, to towards Bulu's right flank. Because, remember, at this point, Bulu is, they've sort of got into Plancenoit in this area here, but the young guard are moving back in, and there's kind of a stalemate going on here. So the pressure for Zieten is to move across and to put pressure on the sort of right flank of the left flank of the young guard, or the right flank, and be the right flank of Bulu, if you get my drift. So this is a crucial point, because remember, we've got the Reich. He's gone off to see the situation for himself, and he's he gets back to this area here, and he finds Zieten about to do this move towards the south and not along the ridge towards Wellington. And Reicher had, so he was the staff officer for Zieten. He had actually promised Saxe-Weimar that there was support coming. But at this point, you've got Zieten having to weigh up whether he obeys the order of the staff officer of Blucher, or his own chief of staff in his corps. So he decides that he better obey the staff officer of Blucher. And so he decides then that his men would turn their backs then on, put their not come along this ridge here towards Wellington, but they will actually move down to the left here. And so he begins the motion towards the village you see ahead of you there in Plancenoit. At this point, Muffling is looking down the ridge towards Zieten's position, and he sees this move, and he immediately gallops over to Zieten. Words are exchanged, let's put it that way. And Muffling persuades Zieten to change his mind and turn back towards Wellington. Now, at this point, we got to keep in context. This is around about 7 o'clock in the afternoon, and for context, the battle for La Haye-Saint has been waging all day long, and eventually Bering's men here, Bering's men here are running out of ammunition, and actually La Haye-Saint is going to be taken by the French, and this then opens up the ability for the artillery to move up onto this ridge and then be able to pour fire into the squares of the Anglo-Dutch army. So Muffling has come over here and said to Zeitzen, "What the hell are you doing, man? We need you over here," and persuaded him to come back. So it's as Wellington would say, it's a very close run thing. So if you think about the situation right now, yes, Napoleon has had to use some of his reserve, but the young guard have moved in back into Plancenoit and look like they may be able to hold it. Ney has now managed to grab control of La Haye-Saint. The cavalry are up here keeping the Allied Dutch army in square up this end, and yes, Zeiten's corps is pouring out here, but they will be moving this way, but they need to go that way. So at this point, you could say that the battle was still in limbo, because the Imperial Guard the rest of the Imperial Guard will be preparing to launch their attack on Wellington's position, and this is at 7 o'clock in the evening. And that seems to be a good place to take another break. And so when we come back, we'll look into the second phase of the attack on the village of Plancenoit, and we're talking around about 7 o'clock in the evening now, on the 18th of June. So thank you very much for listening, and do all the loving, hugging, ticking, smiling, whatever it is that you do these days on social media, and I will see you in a moment, if you're watching live, and if you're not, and then I'll see you in the next episode. Welcome back to Flight Past. You are with me in the Huey. We are flying over the battlefield of Waterloo. And we've got to around about 7 o'clock in the evening. And the situation at the moment is in the balance. Down below us here, we've got the village of Plancenoit. And the Prussians have done a first wave of attack, managed to seize the village, pushing Lobau's infantry back. But this commits Napoleon to introduce to the battle is part of his reserve, and he has to send the Young Guard in, de Hesme's Young Guard into Plancenoit to shore up the position. Now, this is at the same time over here on our left as we just fly by. La Haye-Saint has just fallen to Ney, essentially because Bering's Hanoverians, King's German Legion, have run out of ammunition, and they get overwhelmed and have to quit La Haye-Saint. So there's a sort of situation here where the crisis is literally upon us. At this point, then, the Prussians begin a second assault on the village of Plancenoit, and this is performed by a guy called Hilling, and with the rear guard of Bülow's corps, with the brigade of Rissel supporting him. And so let's just pause here. We jump out, and we can then use the drone to get a good look. So we can see down below us here, this is the village of Plancenoit. We are looking essentially at the rear of the French position. This yellow cornfield right in the middle here is, I believe, essentially where the Imperial Guard of Napoleon is based. And so you can see how close Plancenoit is to that position. And so essentially Napoleon is trying to hold off, palm off the Prussians whilst he tries to complete his attack on Wellington's position. So the second assault begins. Once again, the French canister is being used to blast into the Prussian advance in point blank range, and the village is essentially held by the Young Guard of the part of Wellington's reserves, and they're basing their defence around the churchyard here. And Rissel's brigade manages to press in and force these Young Guards back and out of the church area. But the French hold the buildings around the church, and so there's almost like a point blank firing going on here. At this point as well, the Rissel's troops managed to seize some of the French artillery pieces, and they take a number of prisoners. So the intensity of the fighting in this area increases. So you can feel the desperation going on, the last-ditch defensive actions by the Young Guard. But the Young Guard is eventually forced back. And Lobau is forced to retreat his troops. because he doesn't want to expose his flank. And the time now is around about 7:15 in the evening. So at this point, with the Young Guard being pushed back, then when Napoleon's rear positions are in peril. And so the only reserves left for Napoleon at this point is actually the Old Guard. And 2 of the battalions of the Old Guard are ordered into Plancenoit. And it again delays Napoleon's attack on Wellington's position. He needs to make sure that his right flank here is secured. And around this point as well, Duhesme, who was the commander of the Young Guard, is wounded, and he's informs Pele, the P-E-L-E-T. He informs him of the desperation of the situation. Duhesme at this point is being held up on his own horse. He would eventually die, I believe, a few days later, and he would be, I think it's at the Roi d'Espagne, which is the building in Genappe, which Wellington had stayed at on the night of the 16th. That's where he would eventually die. So this point as well, so the village of Plancenoit here is now completely in Prussian hands. And the Young Guard are breaking and falling back. But when the Young Guard are pulling back in this situation, they are falling into the Old Guard. They're falling into these very experienced troops, the Grand Chasseurs, and they manage to stabilize the situation. The Chasseurs managed to force the Prussians back. They counterattack. And this is when some of the most serious hand-to-hand fighting occurs. The range is really close. No time to reload, and so it's all done with the bayonet and the butt, as they say. And it's believed that the village is then retaking again for the second time by these troops of the Old Guard. So this allows then the sort of a slight lull in the battle. And this allows essentially Napoleon to conduct his last effort to send forward troops to try to break Wellington's line. But Plancenoit only remains in. So that we'll have a look at that situation in another stream. But this is the So this is the situation at the moment. These chasseurs appeared. The old guard have managed to secure back this village for the second time, but it doesn't stay in the French hands for long. We have the remaining of the old guard essentially move off from this area here, heading up on their fateful march up the slope at Waterloo. And we just basically have these the two battalions over here of the old guard start to be overwhelmed with the numbers of Prussian troops coming out of these woods and moving towards them. And we get at this time as well not only Bulu's corps fighting here, but Perch's corps is arriving, and they're moving in as well. So we get at this point to Pelchka's brigade appears, and they start moving in, and we're talking they move in on 3 lines. It's described as one consisting of 3 battalions. They moved from the north, essentially coming in from this angle, probably from here, drawn in towards the spire of the church. Another 2 battalions moved in from the east, and 3 more battalions believed to come in from this sort of southeasterly direction. And we're talking here, we're getting on to around about 8 o'clock in the evening. The state of the village at this point: the church is on fire, buildings are on fire in the village, and there's house-to-house fighting going on. Many of the wounded burned to death. We have this is known as the Lasne Defile coming up here, and so we have another Hillier's brigade, I believe, working up this area here, coming in from to this sort of almost the south of the French position. And essentially these 2 battalions of old guard are getting swamped at this point here, and they're having to be forced to withdraw. But this was done in good order. With the grenadiers moving back first, covered by the chasseurs. But they do have to leave their heavy equipment behind, artillery and ammunition. And so there's a definite, presumably around about the same time as the old guard recul over here on the ridge there. You're getting them being sort of forced back over here at the same time. And you essentially get this sort of a wave here. We're talking probably, this is after the Wellington's general order to advance has occurred. We'll have a look at the situation up on the ridge later, but in this section here, the Old Guard have moved back in good order, but the Prussians are pushing up into this area here now and getting to the road, the Genappe road. And then we've got a sort of a general melee of troops then sort of starting to pull back along this road here and in this direction towards the south. Everything gets mixed up. It's believed that there's a whole sort of mixture of troops and chaos going on. And around about 8:30 then, we could probably describe the battle as being essentially over. So the army of the north has at this point has essentially become a sort of a mass of fleeing soldiers. There's some order, especially in the Imperial Guard. Many of the artillery pieces are left behind. And there's 2 battalions of the Old Guard essentially are kept back. They're almost like a sort of the bodyguard of Napoleon. They were described as being around the Belle Alliance. And this is where they were described as forming square. So we're talking in this area here. They tried to hold back the flood of broken men now running from the battlefield. And they managed to essentially withdraw in reasonably good order. And they're described as one of the squares moving essentially, I think, across this way here. They call it going. They moved across country. So if you're around this area here, then essentially, if you're going cross country, you'd probably say back this way. And the other one would draw along the road. Towards Rossomme, which is back here. It's believed that one of these squares was where Napoleon would actually take some cover, but as the situation deteriorates, he then is escorted by his staff back to the farm at Le Caillou, and this is where the first chasseurs are left, and that is here. And then they that battalion, the first chasseurs, covers Napoleon's escape, essentially, back to Genappe. Much of the pursuit of the French stopped after they quit the battlefield. And it's, as you say, it's 8:30, 9 o'clock, starting to get dark. And they've, if you think of the Prussians, they've actually done a super effort this day. They've marched essentially 25 kilometers. Boulou's corps, at least, have gone 25 kilometers. And then they fought a battle from around about 4:30, 5 hours later, they've had a bit of a long day, and so the actual attack or pursuit of the French is made essentially by some cavalry elements of the Prussians. And the so-called famous meeting, believed or reported to be at La Belle Alliance, it might not have happened. It might actually have happened somewhere further back, actually, towards La Maison de Roi or even Le Caillou. So essentially, why did the Prussians win here? It was basically down to numbers. The sheer weight of numbers. Eventually, you've got almost 2 corps of Prussians arriving on the battlefield in this area. You got Perche and Boulou to begin with, and then Perche followed. So 3, 4, 5 brigades arriving here. So eventually, it's just the weight of numbers forces back the reserve essentially of the French. Even though we're talking top quality troops, young guard, elements of the old guard, the sheer numbers forces them back. So then, in terms of numbers, then let's talk numbers. It's believed the Prussians lost around about 6,000 men in this struggle for this part of the battlefield in this village here, and the French essentially lost around about 4,000 troops. Most of the fighting was street fighting. Wasn't really once it got into the village, then it wasn't really possible to do formation, so there's a lot of hand-to-hand fighting. There was a lot of close hand canister fire, so you can just imagine the conditions in this sort of narrow streets of a village. But what you essentially have here then is you've had, say there's 22 battalions of reserve, then essentially almost 2/3 of his reserve is committed to the defense of this position. And so you can see then that when you have the attack eventually of the old guard up the slope at Mont Saint-Jean, then the weight of numbers is no longer there anymore. Right. I think then we shall take a quick break there. So we've got to around about 9 o'clock on the evening of Waterloo, and we've seen then the impact that the Prussians have made on this on the battlefield. And when we come back, we'll start discussing the events on the ridge at Mont Saint-Jean. We'll look at what happened there, and then we can join the two sort of stories up in this area later. So I will leave that there for you for now, and I'll take a quick break, and when I come back we'll continue the story of Waterloo. Welcome back to Flight Path. My name is Simon, and I hope you've been enjoying this story and reconnaissance flight and exploration of the Battle of Waterloo. And we're getting now to the very end of the story of the actual battle itself. And in the last episode, we were looking at Plancenoit, the Prussian attack of Boulou's corps and then Purchase corps, and how that was drawing in Napoleon's reserves across to the eastern side of the battlefield over here, where my white dot is now. And so in this a series of episodes going forwards, now we're going to concentrate more on Wellington's side of the battlefield, but it was important to have this area here, the context of this area here, in your mind when we think about what's going on at on the ridge at Mont Saint-Jean. Just a little wrap up on this area here as well. We're talking about Boulou, and we're talking about the Prussian attack. I just thought a little tie-up here was that Thielman. Now remember, Thielman is in charge of the 3rd Corps, and he was essentially in charge of the rear guard of the Prussian army. He was at Wavre, and Blucher receives a dispatch from Thielman. I believe it was timed somewhere after 4:30. I'm not quite sure, but it basically informs Blucher that he is currently in battle with Grouchy's forces at Wavre. And essentially asks for some assistance, I think. Blucher basically, or Ganasnai, sorry, the chief of staff, turns around and says something like, "Let Thielman defend himself as best he can. It scarcely matters if he is crushed at Wavre, provided we can gain victory here." And so that's in the sort of the middle of this battle. That's the thing that's going on, and we will look into the Grouchy's battle with Thielman on this day, and how Grouchy extradites his corps, essentially, away and back into France. But we'll do that in the sort of a wrap-up side of things later on. So remember, around about 4:30 is when Boulou would start to attack on the Plancenoit thing, and we've seen that through to the sort of end. Let's join it up now with the sort of with Wellington's side of things. We left the Anglo-Dutch army surrounded by French cavalry, and they're the series of charges by the cuirassiers of the French. But the charges of these French cavalry was getting weaker and weaker. The confidence of the Anglo-Dutch squares were gaining, because essentially the cavalry of the French had no infantry support or artillery or much artillery support, and so cavalry against squares were effectively useless after a while. And so the Anglo-Dutch army are holding off at the moment, the French. Even though, remember, we were talking about how it looks from this side, the Prussians come up and they really believe that the battle, it looks like it's lost. Actually, if you've gone into the thick of the centre of Wellington's line, you see that these regiments, battalions and regiments in square are actually holding their own. So essentially around about 5:30 in the afternoon, literally the sort of the fatigue is set in. The French cavalry, the mud, the littered ground with wounded and dead, essentially means that the French cavalry are finding it very difficult even to get to these squares or all the guns. There was essentially around about 6 o'clock, I think. There was a Ney did manage to get a combined cavalry and infantry artillery attack against de Plat's King German Legion, and they were described as being attacking Hugh Halcott's Hanoverians behind the Hougoumont enclosure. So let's fly over there and see if we can see what that area looks like. It was essentially, it was a pressure point, but the British and King's German Legion's batteries managed to sweep the slopes, and then Maitland's guards forces the Tyroliers off the ridge. And this turns out to be one of the few times on this battle where there was an actual combined infantry, cavalry and artillery attack planned by the French, but it was countered with Adams' brigade on the flank over here. And we're talking this area around here, I believe, is where this action occurs. And they managed to sweep off these the French from the ridge, and the ridge is this area here. Kempt calls for reinforcements and gets the reply back from Wellington that reinforcements were impossible and we must die on the spot we now occupy. And at the same time as Wellington is asking for Wellington's officers are asking for reinforcements, Ney's doing the same thing to Napoleon, and he gets the reply back, supposedly, which is infantry. Where does he expect me to take them? Does he expect me just to make them? So you can see that both commanders are right down to their last reserves. Wellington is in a process as well of trying to drive off these clouds of Tyroliers off the ridge, and he's getting the guards to form 4-rank lines and volleys and controlled charges to get these Tyroliers off this ridge at the top, and then getting the guards then to quickly form square again before the French cavalry can attack them. So let's just pause here. I would jump out. So we're talking about this area over this side. So obviously what's happening then, you've got French cavalry. They're literally now on this slope here. And the road at the top you can assume is where the British artillery would have been positioned, and then you've got down on the reverse slope is where all these squares are. And essentially there's a fight going on for the control of this ridge. Cavalry are coming up in waves, but they can't get close to these guys. They've lost a lot of the oomph. And it sounds like then the French skirmishers are coming up here, and they're kind of lining this ridge and taking fire on the squares below. And Wellington, in this sort of area, is ordering his guards to form up and essentially drive these Tyrrelliers off the ridge best they can, and then forming up a square as quickly as possible so they don't get charged. And reports at this time is the fighting in the Hougoumont area is starting to wane. The French are basically losing a lot of... they're losing their reserves, they're losing their reinforcements, and the fighting starts to calm down here. And on the eastern side, essentially the eastern side is now is less of a stressful position because the cavalry have already swept this side of the field of the Erlon's divisions, and we've got the mere presence of the Prussians arriving, relieving the situation on this one here. But there are localized positions that are falling to French on this side. And there's reports of Alten's division and Cruiser's Dutch Nassau contingent getting into serious trouble on this part. There's reports of Lambert's brigade, the 1st battalion of the 27th, was forming square next to the Genappe Road. This is the Genappe Road here. And it's believed that they lost about 400 men without even firing a shot. They were essentially coming under artillery fire and skirmisher fire. And there's reports of Halkett's brigade, essentially the 30th, the 73rd. They had essentially run out of ammunition and couldn't reply in return any fire. Halkett says he felt obliged to ask permission to be withdrawn from the line as a temporary reprieve. Some of his brigade has suffered something like 2/3 casualties. And Wellington replied to him, "Tell him that what he asks is impossible. He and I and every Englishman on the field must die on the spot which we now occupy." So he couldn't essentially allow anybody to be seen to be withdrawing from this position, because Wellington's probably perfectly aware that if one battalion starts to move back, then the others will break and go as well. Alten himself was wounded and had to be carried from the field. Obtegda was dead, and his brigade sacrificed in this area here. Kilsmenzegger was now effectively the division commander, but he was only had 4 battalions in squares, and they were receiving heavy fire at this point. And essentially because the La Haye-Sainte falls, then the French can just advance up and start essentially pouring fire into these squares. So the fighting is now up on the ridge here, fighting control of these ditches and hedges up here. And essentially what you got at this time is Wellington's reserves are completely depleted, and the only way that they'll be able to plug gaps now is by pulling in the flanks. And remember that the cavalry reserve is essentially now down to just a couple of squadrons because of the disorganization after the main charge. And around this point as well, the Prince of Orange is wounded and forced to retire from the field. And 2 of Wellington's aides-de-camp are killed. This is supposedly meant to mark the spot where the Prince of Orange was wounded. So you can sort of see the sort of person this Prince of Orange is, or at least what his dad is like, having this thing built because his son gets wounded when about 50,000 people are killed on this field. This whole monument is essentially built for him. It's a monstrosity. I hate it. Now, remember when this the situation, and we were talking about the Prussians arriving, all they could see was streams of people pouring off the battlefield. And what happens a lot of the time is when someone gets injured, it's amazing how many friends that person has to help them back off the field. So it's almost like every person who's injured has 2 friends to help them walk off. So you can see how close this feels up here. The carnage going on at this time from around about 5 o'clock is just incredible. And we mentioned it before as well, Papelotte and some of these places over here on the left start to crumble just before the impact of the Prussians arrive. And this is the view that Ziethen's chief of staff sees when he arrives here. There's sort of the falling back from this end here, and from this angle it just looks like the whole front of Wellington's is collapsing. So we talk about Ney asking for troops and Napoleon saying, troops, where do you expect me to get them? Do you expect me to make them? The passion that statement suggests, you know, a couple of hours earlier you would have argued that there was 14 battalions of reserve back here, but it's exactly that time that Ney's asking for these troops that the the pressure from the right-hand side gets extreme. And so it's that pressure from what Napoleon can see from this angle here is that his immediate use of his reserves is to his right and not to his front. And remember, this is a time when the Prussian cannonballs are starting to fall on this road here at this position. So he obviously feels that that is the priority at the time. And so this window, they call it, of opportunity, you could argue it's a window that Ney has provided. He has the Anglo-Dutch locked down on the route, on the ridge here. They're in essentially square formation. This would be the ideal time to throw up the reserve up here in strength at this point. But they're denied by the Prussians. There's arguments about the state of mind of Napoleon at this point. There's arguments here that he has gone into a state of shock, that he realizes that his goose is cooked, as it were, and that's why he reacts like he does. You could argue that the same thing could be happening with Ney. There seemed to be some sort of a frustration between them. It could have been still bad blood from the day before, or the day when Ney didn't react quickly to the retreat of Wellington. There's a lot of ifs and buts about it. Napoleon himself had actually predicted this sort of state of mind. He said at Austerlitz, he said, and I quote, one has but a short time for war. I am good for another 6 years, and then I shall have to stop. So he was aware of his shortcomings or weaknesses, or the growing, essentially, could you argue it's post-traumatic stress disorder sort of effects. Right, there is a good place to finish, I think. And so I'll bookmark that position. And I'd like to thank you all for watching. And when we come back, this will probably be the last part of this stream, and I will do a new stream. We will wrap up this battle. So we have left to talk about is the capture of La Haye-Sainte, and then the advance of the French artillery up onto the ridge, and then we can talk about the actual advance of the old guard. And so that will be in the next stream. So that will probably be a good 3-hour stream live on Twitch and on YouTube, and we will do that to wrap up the Battle of Waterloo. If you've enjoyed this, please give it a like or subscribe, a follow if you're on Twitch. I'd like to thank everybody who does do that. Twitch says I need some followers, so if you want to be one of these people here to join us on this trip, then please do that. If you've missed any of this stuff and you want to go back, then there's a playlist on YouTube. You can go back. It's all broken up into these little chunks, and you'll be able to find out what happened before. Feel free to leave a comment. If you think I've said something wrong, then say so. If you've got something interesting to say so. If you want to see anywhere, then let us know. And we'll be able to complete this all up. We won't just finish at the Battle of Waterloo. We're going to follow Napoleon all the way back to Paris. We're going to follow him all the way to St. Helena, and we'll finish up the whole playlist at St. Helena. So we've got lots to come still. We'll have, as I say, we've got the Old Guard's attack. We've got the pursuit of into the evening of the day, and we're going to look at the pursuit of the French army all the way back. We'll look at Wavre. We'll look at Grouchy's fight with Thieleman's there, his way that he pulls back from Wavre all the way back into France. And as I say, so we've got a few more streams to come yet on this channel. This channel is just me talking, flying live, talking live. It's never going to be edited, and it's there so that you can see there's a real person talking about real things. So if you want to become part of the channel, then all you've got to do is leave a comment below or join in the stream, and you can be part of the production of this the channel. It's for historians, it's for people who like flying, but it's mainly for those people who always have the finger in the map section of a history book. And we will do other subjects. We've done D-Day, we're doing Waterloo, we'll do the Falklands War next. I want to do the Anglo Zulu War. I also want to look at things like, let me just grab this book. The last moments of Amelia Earhart, and we've got a series as well. We began way back in, well, it feels like a long time ago. It was in Christmas time. We began with a series called Pioneers of Flight, and we looked at Wilbur and the Wright brothers. And so I want to do another one of the Pioneers of Flight, and this is a book I picked up called Amelia Earhart. That's by Mary Lovell. It's called The Sound of Wings, and we're looking into the mystery of her death. That would be quite cool to do. If anyone's got any suggestions for topics, then let me know, and if I've got any interest in it, I'll probably do it. Otherwise, I've waffled on too long again, and I will leave you be as we are flying over southern Belgium in the Huey, and I will see you again soon. Bye bye.